Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and joining me today is donalee Moulton, whose short story Swan Song appears in the Cold Canadian Crime Anthology published by Crime Writers of Canada. donalee has been writing professionally for over 25 years. Her byline has appeared in more than 100 magazines and newspapers throughout North America and beyond. But Swan Song is her first mystery short story. So, donalee, what was the inspiration for your first mystery? Or your first fictional mystery?
The inspiration was the Crime Writers Association of Canada. In celebration of their 40th anniversary, they put out a call for submissions to their anthology. And my background is a deadline background. So there was a very firm date by which you had to submit a story, and there was a word count. And I'm used to working with word counts. So I said, I can do this. I can meet the deadline and I can meet the word count. I didn't know if I could actually do the story part of it. But thank you. I guess good news, I could.
Yes, good news. I know that you live in Halifax, but your story takes place in Iqaluit. So why did you choose that location?
And it's probably the path of least resistance. The theme of the contest and the anthology is that it had to be cold. And in the instructions, they made it quite clear that cold could be broadly defined. It could be a cold case. It could be two people or more who were estranged from one another. But I just said, well, cold is often weather. I've been to Iqaluit. I've worked in and out of there for a number of years, so I was familiar with it. And I know that as wonderful as it is, it can also be very cold. So I thought that gave me, I didn't have to explain the cold. I didn't have to kind of justify why I fit within the theme. It would be quite obvious.
Yeah, I don't think you didn't have to. I don't think you go into long descriptions of the weather because I think every Canadian assumes it's going to be cold.
When you're that close to the Arctic Circle, it's cold. It is interesting. As part of the contest, you get the judges' comments back, and they were very kind in terms of plot and character and everything else. But all three of them pointed out the fact that the story was set in Iqaluit was an interesting element of the story. And I thought afterwards, I bet that's right. I bet when we're thinking of setting Canadian stories, we're thinking of cities or rural areas, but we don't necessarily go north. And I hadn't done it with that in mind, but their comments kind of reaffirmed that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I had the same feeling too, like, oh, how Canadian, how Canadian is that? But yeah, very few Canadians write about it. And I was going to ask you if you'd actually been there and did your research there, but you already answered us. Actually, then what's it like up there?
You know, I worked out of Iqaluit. I didn't live there, but I did, as some of the characters in my short story do, I did training out of there. So I flew in and out over a period of about 3, maybe 4 years. And I was always there during snow season. So I would start in September and I would go up until about April, May. So I never got what many of them call dirt and bug season. When the snow goes, the bugs come out in full force. And many of the people that I spoke with actually preferred the cold and the snow because it's, in many ways, it's very pristine. It's very beautiful. It's not as stormy as, for example, in my world in Halifax. We tend, right? That obviously happens, but it doesn't happen as much as just this cold settles in and you just learn to live with it. It's very dry. You can walk for what seems like miles and it's just wonderful, but you do have to be very careful because you are breathing in often with a wind chill of a -40, -50.
Ooh, yeah. It must be very dark, I would guess, too, at that time of year.
It is, in the sense that it is their dark time of year, but Iqaluit has about 7,000 people, I think. So there's always buildings with a light on. There are some street lights. There is activity going on. So it's not like you need a flashlight.
Great. I was also looking at some of your other works, and I think your most recent is called The Thong Principle. I quickly learned it's not about beachwear, but what could you tell us about it?
It's the kind of flip side to the creative writing. So For many years, I've worked as a communications specialist, and that's what took me initially to Iqaluit. And so this is about how do we express ourselves in a way that makes sense to people, but also gets us the end goal that we have when we start to communicate in the first place. So it's about writing well and speaking well. And the Thong Principle relates to a little example of comfort. Are you comfortable in the skin you're in? Are you comfortable in the language you're using, in the tone you're taking?
Yeah, I read the beginning, so I know why you called it that. But also, a lot of the reviewers for that book said that they found it quite funny, or you told a lot of stories. You're a storyteller and you tell a lot of stories. And I came across the P.T. Barnum story that you have at the beginning. Do you mind sharing that one? Because that's what sold the book to me.
Absolutely not. And the P.T. Barnum story, I think, is important because it reflects the fact that often when we want to impress people, we think we have to use the fancy language and the jargon and the big words. And P.T. Barnum was having an issue with people wanting to stop and gawk at all of his exhibits, some of which I'm sure were horrifically offensive and others which were immeasurably intriguing. But he, as a good capitalist, wanted just to move people through that line as quickly as possible. And so he had to find a way to get them to stop browsing and looking and talking. So he put up a sign, and the sign said egress. And what would happen is people would go back past the tattoo lady with the 2,000 tattoos, the three-headed man, right? All of those kinds of things. And then they get very excited because the next thing that they were going to see was the egress. And wouldn't it be wonderful to see the egress? And they wondered what the egress would be like. And of course, once they found out that egress simply means exit, they were now outside the exhibit, and the only way to get back in was to pay again and go through. I think in cases like that, we feel slightly betrayed or slightly stupid when we're outside, right? And that's the other thing about language, of course, is that it's not just conveying information, but it's also getting an emotional reaction out of us. And so the Thong Principle explores that.
Yeah, and then you also mentioned that P.T. Barnum's sort of cheating, and that a lot of times in communication, trust is important too, right? So
absolutely, we're going to be highly suspicious of every sign that he puts up after that, right?
So yes, we shouldn't make that mistake. We said that this was your first fiction mystery, Swan Song, but I did see a book that you wrote a few years back now, but more true crime. It was called Celebrity Cold Cases, Trials of the Rich and Famous.
Yes.
I think it was 2006 you put that one out. Any thoughts of a new one? Because there's been some fabulous crimes lately, or some fabulous trials lately.
Bless your heart. The interesting thing about celebrity court cases was it was written at a time when we were all internet comfortable and somewhat, we thought, internet savvy, but we weren't certainly social media omnipresent. And so a lot of what we could put in the book about those court cases that people might not have realized, it's very hard to replicate that today because we've got this 24/7 coverage of everything. Like, you couldn't write about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Like, I just can't imagine what new we could bring to that somebody hasn't already covered. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the opposite route. So I'm going to, instead of writing about the real mysteries and crimes and how they occurred, I'm going to, in fact, I'm just in the point of revising it at this point, the fictional first mystery novel.
Oh, excellent.
Not set in Iqaluit. In hindsight, wouldn't that be great?
What's it about? Before, just give us a sneak peek.
I'll dangle a carrot. So you want your main character to have something that perhaps distinguishes them from other main characters. So my main character, interestingly enough, for me, as in Swan Song, is male. I would have thought that my natural bent would have been to make the main character female. The main character in this case is male. He is CEO of a cannabis corporation, and he has an interesting characteristic that distinguishes him from about 95% of the population.
Well,
Yeah, I know.
we're all going to have to wait for that one.
That's right.
But you don't have to wait for the Thong Principle. I saw that one on Amazon, and you don't have to wait for Swan Song, everyone. That's in Cold Canadian Crime. Second story, I believe. So the publishers must have liked it as much as I did. So thank you very much, Donalee, for doing this interview with us. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Oh, look, thanks for having me.
And thank you for everyone for watching.